Did you think your life was over?
At the time, a little bit after it, I thought I was actually going to take my life. Which is, at the time, you're not thinking straight. Your mind is a jumble, and not my first thought, at the time, I couldn't even tell you what was going through my head.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. Episode 23, The Ultimate Suffering, was the most impactful episode that the Suffering Podcast ever recorded. Gene Hauburger experienced the worst suffering imaginable. Here is the original opening read from May 23rd, 2021. We all think we know what suffering is. Hardship, worry, pain, however you want to define it. Everybody believes their suffering is important, and it is. Perspective is everything when it comes to suffering. I used to tell new parents or parents-to-be this: you may have thought you knew what suffering and worry was, but now you're going to find out that you didn't know as much as you thought. Children are a part of us, a tiny sliver to let the world know we existed at one point in time. They bring us joy, love, sorrow, and of course, suffering. I can't picture my life without my children. To be honest, I really don't want to. The loss of a child, to me, can aptly be defined as the ultimate suffering. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back one of the most impactful people that we have ever met or ever had on this show. Unfortunately, we only had him on audio, and that's Gene Hauburger. And joining Gene tonight is Lynn Manzione.
Got it.
Wow, look at you.
And
he studied.
I had a tough time naming this one, so this is just going to be the suffering of Gene Hauburger, because I think that encapsulates everything. But Gene is one of the strongest people we've ever met. We talk about him frequently, and we brought him in the studio so everybody can finally see his face. Gene, Lynn, thank you so much.
Yeah, I got to say, we refer to a lot of former guests. I don't think we refer to anybody more than we refer to Gene.
Never.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Like Kevin said, I mean, it's an impactful story, and you're one of the strongest people I ever met.
No. When we name these episodes, sometimes we hit the mark, sometimes we miss. Your original one was, what was it, May 23rd?
2000.
I got it written down. May 23rd, 2001, episode 23.
2021.
What did I say?
I said 2001. We haven't been in business that long.
Well, you weren't here, but I was. And we do refer to you constantly. But that episode's name was The Ultimate Suffering. And I still hold true to that is one where we hit the mark. And Lynn, how'd you get hooked up with this guy?
Well, believe it or not, we went to high school together, but we hadn't seen each other in 30-something years. And it's a very long, strange story of how we ended up doing the film together. I don't know if you want to get into that whole thing right now.
Well, we will. I want to get into that because that's going to be a very pivotal part of Gene's story. I just wanted to note how smiling, when you first came down into the basement, Gene.
We were just talking about the shoulders down.
You looked beaten.
Yeah.
And now you walk in, you're doing a little dance in the lobby.
It's been a journey. It's gotten much better. I'm more at peace with myself.
Well, I think that's
the right thing to say.
I mean, we had Gene in with the Elite Show, too, in here that one time.
That's right.
I sat in on that one.
Before we get into anything else, I want to give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust them. So go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you a car. Same thing as always. From 2 years ago, we take a social media question. We take a question from one of our audience members. This one comes from Serendipity324. And he or she writes, what anchors you? I pulled this one specifically for you because things get stormy, and an anchor always holds you down, keeps you from drifting off in times of trouble. But an anchor can also sink you. What anchors you in times of trouble? Gene, I'm going to go with you first.
I mean, right away you think of your family, which is first and foremost. But my group of friends that I have, I believe if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I would be here or not. You know, it was very tough in the beginning. And when your family's going through it also,
You try to hide it from them a little bit.
you know, your group
Try
of
to be the
friends-
rock.
Yes. And I'm not much of a rock at that time. You know, I was probably an anchor that would sink you at then.
When the rock is hurting and everybody else is hurting, you can't show them.
So it was, you know, my group of friends, I've known them since preschool, some of them, over 50 years, most of them. And without them, you know, besides my family, which of course is always number one, but my group of friends.
Lynn, what do you think?
Well, I think that's true because I see their Facebook posts and they do everything together, and it's really nice to see that
disgusting.
relationship.
It's disgusting.
But for me, I like silence. I've had a lot of crazy upheavals in my house at times, so I like to ground myself in maybe nature, going out for a walk and having some quiet time.
Meditation or anything like that?
Yeah, a little bit of that. I don't know if I do it right, but I try to.
You know the cool thing about meditation, because I meditate every day. There's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah,
It's whatever brings you peace. It's whatever quiets your mind, whatever allows you to focus.
right.
Mike?
Yeah, like Gene said, I think it's mainly family. Family's going to keep you grounded. But to me, it was staying active. It was going to the gym all the time, you know, going running and all that. You know, that was my safe place. You know, it was my safe place where I could just go and I could be by myself and I could be myself.
Mine is something that's changed in recent years. It's my belief in a higher power. And I don't talk about it all that much, but it's the one place where I can focus on just a feeling. It's a good feeling. It's a positive feeling. Like you had said, Gene, my family, men, and this is maybe this is a problem. Men try to shield the real harshness of life from their families. You know, that's in our DNA. I don't know whether that's the right thing to do, but it's the way that we're born.
Yeah.
You know, especially like being in law enforcement. How many times you never went home and told your family about all the hairy calls we went on?
No, you can't. Because they won't understand you, and you don't want them to feel the same pressures that you feel.
There's no playbook.
No.
You know what I mean? There's, you know, with being a officer or what happened to me with my son, there's no playbook. You don't know what to do.
You just put on that brave face and keep going.
You try. You try.
Well, Serendipity, thank you so much for sending that one in. Keep sending in your questions. We will try to get them on the air. We appreciate everybody who sends in a little question because we're interested in what our guests say. And that's more of like an off-the-cuff thing. Everybody comes in with their own story and their own thing, but that's sort of when we get a little bit more reality on. So, Gene, like Mike said, we speak about you and your episode more than any other episode we've ever recorded because of the way it impacted us.
Absolutely.
But I want you to give a little bit of a recap of your situation.
All right. September of 2015, my son took his life. He had been bullied, cyberbullied. There was a video of him being held by two guys, punched in the stomach. And I don't know. I never saw the video. I didn't want to see it. I don't know what happened, but they posted it on something. And obviously he saw it and got very distraught, and he ended up shooting himself in the head.
You coming home, and I can still remember sitting, this is when we were recording in the basement, I can still remember you telling that story of finding him. I know
we had to stop recording that day.
We had to stop. It was one of the few times that we stopped mid-roll.
We might have to stop again.
And listen, if it gets too much for you, you let me know. I'll just start breaking Mike's chops, and that'll bring you back. Mm-hmm. You know, there are certain moments in our life that bring us back to a time that is not very friendly. I know my anniversary is coming up, and this is something that I can relate to a lot. Because during the anniversary, usually, and it gets longer every year, I start becoming a very miserable person. And I'm trying to break that.
The anxiety kicks in.
It's not easy.
No. Lynn, nobody gets through life without some damage. You ever have an incident like that sort of triggers you, brings you back to something that's a little hurtful?
I mean, I've had some struggles with some family members, and I don't want to get into details or anything, but you know, you can be traumatized, and things can come up that, you know, bring it all back to the surface. I had my parents living with me for 8 years, taking care of them while they were.
That's traumatic in itself.
It was pretty traumatic.
That's what you say. Everybody's got dents here or there. Some people's dents are bigger than others, but everybody's got a dent somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, on Instagram Live, I don't know if you were able to tune in on your way up here, but we spoke about what was known as the Japanese art of kintsugi. So the Japanese will take broken pottery. And normally when you break a pot or something or a little tchotchke in your house, you try to put it together and you try to hide it and make it look as perfect as you possibly can.
Crazy glue.
Crazy glue, you know, it never looks right. But what the Japanese do with broken pottery is they put it back together and they inlay the cracks with gold or silver or something really beautiful, and they become these works of art. So rather than trying to hide those cracks that you think are a weakness, they highlight them and create something ultra beautiful. And that's what we want to do with our show here. So if you don't get emotional about it, and the day you don't get emotional about talking about Jimmy,
The day I don't get emotional is the day I'm dead.
Exactly. Because Lynn, I don't know if you have children.
I have two sons.
We never spoke about that. For those,
I can't imagine that.
No.
I can't even imagine.
That's why we called it the ultimate suffering.
Yeah.
Because there couldn't be anything worse than that.
It was. Did you think your life was over?
At the time, a little bit after it, I thought I was actually going to take my life. Which is, you know, at the time, you're not thinking straight. Your mind is a jumble, you know, and not my first thought, you know, at the time, I couldn't even tell you what was going through my head, but I know not too long after it, I thought about it.
Would anybody ever come up to you and say, Gene, what are you doing here? You have two lovely daughters, one of whom I've met. One, I think, is trying to avoid me, just like your wife is trying to avoid me. You have two lovely daughters. You have a beautiful wife. You have a pretty good life. What are you doing?
You know, you don't think about that at the time. There wasn't even a thought. My kids, my wife, didn't even enter my mind at the time. It was about me.
It's just so many questions and so few answers.
Which is probably what Jimmy at the time, because I'm sure if he would have thought about the impact of, it's like a wave. It just keeps on going and gets bigger and bigger. And I don't think he thought about that.
You know, for somebody like what you were going through and what Jimmy went through, the outsider's going to look at it and they're going to try to rationalize it. And they're going to try to rationalize an irrational behavior. You know, there is nothing rational about suicide.
No.
Nothing at all. But there's also nothing rational about bullying people. Now, I know you confronted the bully at one point.
I didn't know.
No, somebody not, or some, I thought somebody, I recall somebody knocking on his door and confronting him, or you were hoping that they would come and talk to you.
You know, I would have thought that the parents would have brought their kids over and would have apologized. I mean, I'm sure they didn't mean for that to happen. You know, you
when you're that young, you don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
You know, but the parents should have known better.
I would have thought. I mean, if Jimmy was involved with something like that and that happened, I would have grabbed his ass and I would have brought him right over to the house.
It's one of the greatest life lessons you can teach a kid. I've done that with my kids.
Yeah.
And you know, we had a guest in here, Mike Panis. Mike got into a car while he was drinking, had his friend in the front seat. Mike survived the accident. His friend did not. Mike did some time for it. And while he was in prison, something that was essential for him, for his own healing, was to speak to that young man's father. Yep. And guess what? His father looked at him, and it was probably just as cathartic for the father as it was for Mike. So this person who did this, or these people who did this to Jimmy, are probably hurting, getting some distance from the event. Do you have any empathy at all towards them? I know that's a tough question, but it's something that's important to me.
You know what? I've tried not to even think about them. I mean, in the beginning, there was a lot going on in my head at the time.
Oh, I don't think directly post is a good idea.
you know, but they have to live with it, you know, karma.
Yeah.
I really believe karma.
Do you think one day there'll be men enough? Because they're men now.
Yes.
Do you think one day there'll be men enough
No.
to step up?
No.
Boy, what a shame. I wish I could get a hold of them because...
they got to live their whole lives with that guilt. That's got to be weighing on them.
One of the things that was so freeing to me is the guy who shot at me during my incident. I used to hate him. Up and down, I would hate him. If I ever saw him, I'd kill him because he ruined my life. You know, now, stepping back from it being 10 years removed, what did it take for him to shoot at police twice? What kind of hurt was that man going through? I have a lot more empathy from him, but it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And guess what? When I did that, I took away all his power. I took away everything that he had over me. And it was like a big giant weight off of my shoulders.
I mean, I don't think about them at all, which is probably good.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think about my son. And first and foremost,
I'm sure there were times with your son that were not joyous, like every family.
Every teenager.
he's 17, you know, of course.
Can you remember any of them? It's that's a tough question.
I can remember. I don't want to talk about him, but I can remember. Yeah, that's. You know, he had anger issues, and the anger issues were from being bullied.
Yeah, he was.
You know, and you don't see. After Jimmy took his life, everything started falling into place. What was happening with him, and what was going on, and then finding out, and you know, then you realize, oh, he was doing this because of this.
Mm.
But he wasn't telling you, so you didn't know why he was acting.
He's a 17-year-old boy. You know, they don't have heart-to-heart talks.
I mean, you were saying there were signs like he'd come home and he didn't have his backpack.
Yeah, when he was in junior high, he was always missing stuff. You know, he had a lot of anger as he got older, but I didn't know. Like in junior high, the problem was taken care of. Mm. In high school, I didn't know anything was going on until.
You know, I don't know about. I can't speak for Mike, but after your episode, my kids got a little tighter hug than they normally got. Yeah. And so, and I know a lot of people who listened to that show, and that was our highest show at the time.
Yep.
It got a lot of listens. I know a lot of people did the same thing I did. So out of some sort of darkness, there was some positive stuff. And of course you have the Jimmy Hauburger Foundation.
Yeah, that's the positive out of it. It's a positive, but
it brings you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes I want to step away from it, and you know, it just brings it back.
Just the outpouring of support you get from your friends. Like the one day I stopped up at your golf tournament, and all the people there. I mean, it was fantastic showing up there.
Yeah, it's.
You know, that day. So there's a funny story about that day. We had two golf outings from friends of ours, yours and another one, and Mike and I split. Like all right, Mike, you go here because we gotta be here, and then I'll go here because we gotta be here. That was I always regretted not going to.
I didn't, you know, at first I didn't even recognize him. It just didn't comprehend in my brain. And then
this is so much a hard face to remember.
So much trauma from the first time.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take for you to start getting the word out
about the foundation?
About the foundation, about anti-bullying. How long did that take? How long did you have to heal in order to get there?
See, I think what the problem was that the foundation was started a little too fast. That's what I think.
Is it to fill an empty hole, maybe?
You know, it was my sister-in-law that pushed it, and then,
people just wanting to jump in and help in whatever way they could.
And,
I mean, they went in it with the right intentions, but you need to heal before you start jumping into it.
Did you ever think they did that as an opportunity to force healing on you?
No.
No, I mean, it's because some people do that to other family members.
I think maybe trying to get it off of my mind, what I had seen and experienced, but it didn't. I mean, still to this day, you know, the stuff we do, because it's slowed down quite a bit since we moved. And I moved because of that.
Well, you were living right across from the high school, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah,
And Jimmy took his life just outside the house, and living in that house was very hard for me.
It's got to be.
Geez, my wife sees a mouse and she wants to move out of my house. Can you imagine going through what Jean went through?
She sees you and she wants to move out of the house.
Yeah.
No, it's usually like, no, it's time for you to move out of the house. That's where I get. With the Jimmy Hauburger Foundation, is it ever become triggering for you?
It hasn't. Other things do.
Yeah. Like what? What's a common trigger for you?
Every once in a while, a loud noise really startles me. I didn't hear the gunshot, but I had to have just missed it
Yeah.
because it was right after that I found him.
So two boneheads ask you to come in there and talk about something that you haven't talked about
It was
openly.
very cathartic for me.
Yeah.
You know, because I never spoke to anybody. I think I started to go to somebody that my wife was going to, and I thought it was a waste.
Why us? Like, why did you agree to do that? We had conversations
Yes.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Truthfully, I don't know. I mean, I said things that I've never said before.
Yes.
And like I told you the last time, it was my most peaceful drive
I remember that when he got home, he said it was the most peaceful drive home he's ever had.
back to Lake George.
That was the greatest compliment.
Yep. I got chills just thinking about that.
That was the greatest compliment we could have ever gotten from anybody.
And I didn't think that was going to happen, but